Welcome, fellow seekers of history shadows. Before we journey into the shadowed corridors of medieval monasteries, I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from tonight. Whether you're settling in for sleep in Manchester, beginning your evening wind-down in Melbourne, or finding a quiet moment somewhere between, I'm deeply grateful you've joined me here. If these explorations into history's more unsettling truths resonate with you, please subscribe so you never miss our descent into the past's darkest corners. Now, settle back and let your mind drift with me to a time when faith and fear walked hand in hand, when the promise of salvation came shadowed by the threat of damnation. A cold wind swept across the rugged Derbyshire moors as Captain Arthur Hastings rode at full gallop toward the solitary outline of Hunter's Lodge. The sky, low and leaden, seemed to press the mist closer to the ground, obscuring his view until the last moment. There, framed by gnarled hawthorn and curling wisps of fog, stood the two-story hunting lodge. Its windows dark, its heavy wooden door sealed. Hastings's heart pounded, not from the ride, but from the telegram clenched in his glove. It bore Hercule Poirot's famous neat handwriting. "Murder at Hunter's Lodge. Proceed at once. H.P." He spurred his horse, boots splashing through boggy grass, and approached a scene he knew would test every one of Poirot's little gray cells. Stepping onto the battered doorstep, Hastings noted the absence of footprints other than his own. The hearth inside had long since gone cold. A single bullet hole marred the plaster ceiling. No weapon lay on the floor. Only a pool of dried blood suggested where the victim had fallen. The case of the locked room was born here. No sign of forced entry, only the echo of a crime that whispered of betrayal within these walls. Inside Hunter's Lodge, the hush was profound, broken only by the drip of water from a leaky gutter outside. Hastings pushed open the door and found himself in a low-ceilinged entry hall strewn with coats and hunting gear. He closed the door behind him and immediately tested the massive iron bolt. It was locked from the inside. No latch on the outside. No sign of tampering. Yet, someone had died here, shot through the head. He followed a narrow corridor into the main parlor, where the body of Mr. Harrington Pace lay slumped in a high-backed leather armchair. A single revolver rested on the side table, its barrel still warm. Footprints in the hearthrug led to and from the chair, but none approached the door. Hastings felt the chill of the locked room conundrum. How could the murderer enter, fire a shot, and leave without unlocking the door? Mrs. Zoe Havering, niece of the victim, wept softly in the corner, clad in black silk and clutching a mourning handkerchief. Beside her crouched a frail woman, Mrs. Middleton, the housekeeper, her apron stained red, eyes darting like a trapped bird. Hastings's mind raced. One of them had to be lying. He knelt beside the body, noting how the pistol's muzzle had been wiped clean of fingerprints, yet the butt retained an indent as though squeezed too firmly. A crumpled note lay at Pace's feet, its edges torn, the message incomplete. Hastings tucked it into his coat as evidence, and sent a silent prayer that Poirot's guidance would arrive soon. The hush of the parlor gave way to purposeful activity, as Chief Inspector Japp's arrival lit the scene with authoritarian energy. Japp, broad-shouldered and brusque, barked orders to the local constable. "Cord off every inch!" Hastings stepped aside as the constable swept the floor for stray hairs, and Japp knelt to inspect the carpet's darkened fibers. A careful measurement of the bullet's trajectory, through the ceiling joist above the chair, offered no obvious angle for a shooter standing on the floor. Hastings bagged the torn telegram found in Pace's hand, noting its water-smudged edges. The constable produced muddy boot prints leading from the hearth to the back door, a door that also bore the iron bolt on the inside. Someone had gone to great lengths to mimic a sealed interior. On the sideboard lay a small glass of brandy, half drunk, its surface reflecting the morning light. Hastings. No scent of gunpowder. Who had doctored the scene to obscure the shot's sound? Japp. "We've got a trick box here, Hastings. One to puzzle old Poirot himself." Hastings' chest tightened. Few puzzles could detain Poirot for long. Outside, the moor wind ruffled the curtains as Hastings surveyed the perimeter. A set of tire tracks, modern, from a motor car, curved away from the lodge, vanishing into the mist. The killer had not come on horseback. The mechanics of the crime unfolded like a cruel chess game, every move deliberate, every piece hidden until the final reveal. In the lodge's small communication room, Hastings tapped out his first dispatch to Poirot by Morse code. Each dot and dash a plea for the detective's keen insight. The telegraph clerk, surrounded by a tangle of wires and parchments, worked with mechanical precision. Stamp, slot, send. As the message crackled away into the ether, Hastings felt the weight of isolation. Here, on windswept moors, he was Poirot's hands and eyes. Moments later, the clerk returned with a sealed reply. Hastings broke the wax seal to find a single instruction: investigate the phantom servant. No name, no explanation, just a directive that sent his mind racing back to Mrs. Middleton. Could she be more than she appeared? He compared her uniform's fabric to a swatch he'd pulled from his own pocket, both coarse wool, but the housekeeper's bore a subtle embroidery seam he'd never seen in domestic service. Meanwhile, Japp's men fanned out to interview villagers. Rumors swirled of a mysterious stranger seen tending livestock nearby that morning. Hastings jotted their accounts. Lantern in hand, a tall figure in a period coat. The timing matched the victim's final hours. Whoever it was had slipped in, dispatched pace, and vanished, leaving behind a woman whose very existence might be an illusion. Looming stacks of unsent telegrams lay abandoned, a backlog of messages never forwarded. Hastings slipped one from the pile, noting an address scratched out in haste. The murder, he realized, might have hinged on a single undelivered warning. With dusk approaching, Hastings summoned Roger and Zoe Havering to the parlor for questioning. The heavy oak door closed with finality behind them. Roger, nephew and heir under the will, stood tall and guarded, his jaw clenched, cufflinks gleaming in the lamplight. Zoe, elegant yet poised, offered calm words of condolence that did little to conceal a flicker of triumph in her dark eyes. Hastings began. "Tell me, Mr. Havering, of your uncle's financial dispositions." Roger's voice wavered as he revealed the provisions that left him responsible for the estate's upkeep, but granted full inheritance only if no living caretaker survived. Zoe's soft interjection about family loyalty sounded more like a calculated echo than genuine bereavement. The conversation turned to Uncle Pace's health. He'd been robust until a sudden fever struck 2 weeks prior. A trip to London was canceled at the last minute. Hastings pressed Zoe on that decision. She shrugged, citing Pace's pride. Yet Hastings had discovered a canceled train ticket in the wastebasket, one with Pace's name scrawled in haste. As Zoe rose to refill their teacups, Hastings noticed the same embroidery seam he'd seen on Mrs. Middleton's sleeves, peeking from Zoe's hem. His pulse quickened. Could Zoe and the phantom housekeeper be one and the same? The flicker of doubt passed over Zoe's face, just long enough for Hastings to mark it in his mind. As dawn's pale light filtered through the mullioned windows, Hastings slipped away from the lodge to investigate Mrs. Middleton's curious absence from any official records. He trudged down a winding lane to the village registry office, where the registrar's ledger sat under a glass case. The old clerk, spectacles perched low, peered at Hastings over faded pages. Together they searched for Middleton, Middleton Harriet, even Middleton Mary, but no entry matched the description of the lodge's housekeeper. Returning to the lodge, Hastings confronted the trembling woman in the scullery.
"Madam,"
he said.
"you do not appear in any census or employment rolls."
Her eyes widened as she stammered a denial, but Hastings noted the same fine embroidery seam on her sleeve that he'd seen on Zoe's gown. The seam was too intricate, an aristocratic hallmark, not a servant's. Late that afternoon, Hastings discovered a trunk hidden in a storeroom, its lid secured with a leather strap. Inside lay a maid's uniform over a woman's dress of finer cut. A small monogram, ZH, glinted on the collar. Zoe Havering. Hastings realized the truth. The housekeeper was Zoe in disguise. His pulse quickened at the deception. The couple's collusion was more brazen than he'd imagined. He noted the implications. If Zoe had posed as a servant, She could manipulate evidence, plant mud, wipe the pistol, even alter telegram deliveries. Every step of the crime had been choreographed under the guise of domestic routine. Hastings replaced the trunk lid carefully, understanding that the hour was late and his next move crucial. He sent a brief note to Poirot.
Phantom servant uncovered. Awaiting further counsel.
That evening, Hastings returned to the parlor with the torn telegram piece still in his coat. He spread its damp, ragged edges across the table by lamplight, tracing the half-visible words. Something about midnight and chapel remained. Frustrated, he rifled through Uncle Pace's desk and found a coded letter folded in a hidden compartment. Its cipher, a sequence of numbers and letters, matched patterns he'd learned at Sandhurst. The Cade Mosti Fower headpiece. Mosti A Fire. By flickering candle, Hastings worked to decode it. Each symbol corresponded to a word in a pre-arranged codebook, one likely used by the upper class for discreet communication. The letter warned of a secret meeting at the ruined chapel by moonlight. Whoever attended would finalize arrangements, motive, or further instructions. Hastings realized the crime was not impulsive, but meticulously plotted over weeks. He typed up his findings on a portable typewriter and dispatched them to Poirot via the lodge's telegraph line. While waiting, Hastings paced the hallway and glanced back at the parlor door. He imagined Zoe slipping out in servant's garb, tiptoeing into the night. The coded letter confirmed his suspicion. The lodge's murder was the climax of a long-held conspiracy. Outside, the wind rose in mournful gusts. Hastings resolved to stake out the chapel ruins that very night. He donned a dark cloak and pocketed the ciphertext. In the deathly stillness, every creaking floorboard seemed magnified. As he stepped into the moorland gloom, he felt the weight of responsibility. He was Poirot's proxy, tasked with preventing another secret rendezvous that might leave no witnesses alive. That evening, Hastings returned to the parlor with the torn telegram piece still in his coat. He spread its damp, ragged edges across the table by lamplight, tracing the half-visible words. Something about midnight and chapel remained. Frustrated, he rifled through Uncle Pace's desk and found a coded letter folded in a hidden compartment. Its cipher, a sequence of numbers and letters, matched patterns he'd learned at Sandhurst. The Cade Mosti Fower headpiece. Mosti A Fire. By flickering candle, Hastings worked to decode it. Each symbol corresponded to a word in a pre-arranged codebook, one likely used by the upper class for discreet communication. The letter warned of a secret meeting at the ruined chapel by moonlight. Whoever attended would finalize arrangements, motive, or further instructions. Hastings realized the crime was not impulsive, but meticulously plotted over weeks. He typed up his findings on a portable typewriter and dispatched them to Poirot via the lodge's telegraph line. While waiting, Hastings paced the hallway and glanced back at the parlor door. He imagined Zoe slipping out in servant's garb, tiptoeing into the night. The coded letter confirmed his suspicion. The lodge's murder was the climax of a long-held conspiracy. Outside, the wind rose in mournful gusts. Hastings resolved to stake out the chapel ruins that very night. He donned a dark cloak and pocketed the ciphertext. In the deathly stillness, every creaking floorboard seemed magnified. As he stepped into the moorland gloom, he felt the weight of responsibility. He was Poirot's proxy, tasked with preventing another secret rendezvous that might leave no witnesses alive. Under a silvered moon, Hastings crept across the moor toward the ruined chapel, its crumbling arches silhouetted against the starry sky. The heather was damp beneath his boots, muffling his steps. Every rustle of wind in the ivy felt like a whisper of unseen watchers. He found a moss-covered tombstone to serve as concealment and watched. Time passed in slow heartbeats. At precisely midnight, a lantern's glow appeared down the path, a solitary figure draped in a servant's coat. Hastings recognized the gait, deliberate, practiced. The figure paused at the chapel entrance, glanced back, then slipped inside. Hastings' pulse hammered as he approached, silently, every instinct alert. Inside the moonlit ruin, he saw Zoe and Roger. Zoe held the crumpled telegram. Roger clutched a revolver. They spoke in hushed tones of finishing the arrangement and no loose ends, words heavy with finality. As Roger cocked the weapon in demonstration, Zoe tucked the telegram into her bodice. Hastings emerged from the shadows, voice low but firm. "Step away, or I'll call for Japp." Zoe's eyes flashed, and Roger raised the gun. In that frozen moment, Hastings' world narrowed to the curve of the barrel. Then, a distant howl of wind and the twang of a branch breaking behind them startled the couple. They whirled, confusion flooding their faces. Hastings seized the moment. He lunged forward, knocking the gun aside. It skittered across the stone floor as Zoe... Within seconds, he had Roger pinned. Zoe... Back in the lodge's main parlor, lights blazing, Hastings assembled Zoe and Roger before him like a prosecutor. He slammed the revolver on the table, its barrel still cold from the scuffle. "You claim to be in the garden writing letters," he began, voice measured. "Yet, I found muddy prints leading directly from the chapel." Zoe's composure faltered. Roger's lips pressed into a thin line. Hastings recounted each timeline: the canceled train ticket, the phantom servant's appearances, the coded chapel rendezvous. He produced Poirot's telegram. Sternly, alibis must align with the facts. Zoe argued that she'd fetched water at midnight, but Hastings brandished a broken pitcher found near the stream, its shards bearing her monogram seen. Roger tried to interject, but Hastings raised a hand, studying his face. The siblings' stories unraveled stitch by stitch. Roger admitted he'd lied about his whereabouts to conceal a clandestine business meeting in Derby. Zoe confessed to donning the maid's uniform to avoid recognition while delivering incriminating documents to her husband. Their desperation shone in tearful glances and trembling hands. Yet Hastings withheld the final blow, the undelivered telegram that would have warned Uncle Pace of a poisoning attempt. He watched Zoe's face pale as he described it. "You ensured it never reached him," Hastings concluded. Zoe collapsed into a chair. Roger covered his eyes. They had no further denials. Hastings stood by the window as dawn crept through frost-traced glass. Before him lay the final piece of the puzzle, a Paris-bound ticket tucked inside Zoe's clutch, stamped with a departure time mere hours after the murder. He held it aloft, the gilt lettering catching the first rays of sunlight. "You intended to vanish before justice could find you," Hastings said softly. Roger sank to his knees. "We would have split the fortune and begun anew," he admitted. Zoe's eyes, once steely with resolve, now glistened with regret. Hastings imagined them aboard the steamliner to Calais, smiling for one last photograph, then disappearing into the anonymity of France. But fate had intervened. He rang for the lodge steward and Inspector Japp, who arrived with an official presence that filled the room with authority. Japp examined the ticket, nodded, and secured the couple in cuffs. Outside, the moor wind lashed at the windows, as though in protest. Hastings watched the pair led away, each footstep echoing the end of a grand design born of greed. Before boarding the train back to London, Hastings collected the ticket, proof of motive and intent, and placed it among the telegrams to be forwarded to Poirot. He pictured his friend's sharp smile upon reading that final clue, the penultimate confirmation of the case's resolution. Though the lodge stood silent once more, its secrets were laid bare, and justice, however delayed, had been served. Night had fallen once more over Hunter's Lodge when Hastings, summoned by a sudden thought, tiptoed to the servants' quarters. The corridor was dimly lit by a single oil lamp, its flame flickering in the slight draught. There, leaning against the wall, he caught sight of Mrs. Middleton peeling off her cap and apron to reveal a dress of finer cut beneath. His breath caught. The seam and monogram ZH matched the trunk's hidden uniform. In that instant, Zoe Havering stepped into view, her face pale but composed. Wilkinson the steward hovered nearby, a finest surprise. Hastings' mind raced. The housekeeper was the Turk of a Sorpic, but I think we could let me alone up and like and support some the full letter her case. Only get and it's me you've worked as heavily a judge on Rogers for Easter and met let on. Now of course, it's immersive every on to be said. Yo, am I thinking? Yeah, we're not neither there. I don't sick you up. How many points?
Speaking like a deliver on the back of the boss, I'm loving serious. Why run, please? I'm sorry, so there are. What about the I would do we better church. I'm saying, honestly, I'm not help this pocket hand big parts. They got out of it. Now the dispatch that you to sail, or when I want to smother them to have them, it turned I'm from a little worried. What hear me, one of these brothers, the thing and just news dead at the where did dear how it won't. I'm not very. No, not to be serious. You missed two under unseen even now. Choose now we hold it from my fantastic. Hey, John, you'll see it. It's some every trade because you get watchers and let that fiction half in the day. And you who you made to swing all you pound drinking bit. And notes better there. Maybe grown up people met the start of the season as by. So look at so unsled to the necessity can schmear more lose like can them see I was my non and badges on and feel Jimmy nerd this is don't like Mr. Postal check the next those things or London Fernando what a chat or but it's not elaborate but coming now there things like near sensuous because the humans that's the speaks in film resistant pollock find your that's the thing as I was when I showed to them inside Martin another mixed murder written that just choose nothing Joel is the same no I just another my calculate my fires Martin as a follower paper I'm sure looking to be this director oh and something network when look at that is the here highly attached into mentioned a see every mile to that me I'm saying fire better right I'll take this nice I'm sorry about no I cannot take her slim more I'm at me in a minute flash or compared to this you know what have you done to work I want to just I'm looking where you that doesn't look scroll you first looking just as an against skill here right feel where it says or we will never so look around after even it's talk like well and leaves on how it is and but oh it is look breaking for you which you leave your sunset for a little time that's all weird it's missing no only song I'm very cool smell your face that's fine I don't doesn't type of second lunch at this should learn this the drawer cut final one it's her this is the fellas need lonely have you not so known as anywhere helping my yeah he managed to be about to sustain and some people watch it visit on that picture was it not bad it's really non or earn the collision what under my point you could do another walk into the me ironing to be next let me start the touch of him the game called another so get a some it's how give me your friends some very smart in it and we're just sending how to souls and edges they also wait map and give them does a wound for it to line to or I don't use character box just not one time wait I hadn't believe it in waiting for this did the needs or no risk was at it was those must instead will be certain unfair go on with I see these men that look at it's meant to channel that's more what I don't deal with the person you look the Monday is just network show that was prepared to me all we wouldn't cook we will all when we and the old bound walk we're going to I got this is missing shit and with that the television and so when you go news and we instead there's a straight cut of them eating it have a room so I go out away them say well it's straight and no like kill me the next and say our intense you're long to be now the audience said load and them we go present all me only want to remember is that or something that where you at rangy rabs he's but we're that I'm a little bit nervous visiting a bit of foods of the race all Andrew and I and there was lots of them is I've been converted as a Harrington of your child and repeat
that same midnight, Hastings arranged to confront both Havering siblings together in the main parlor. The fire had burned low, casting flickering shadows across tense faces. Zoe and Roger entered separately, believing they would be questioned in turn, but Hastings barred the door. His tone was calm, but unyielding as he laid out the evidence: the torn telegram, the phantom servant's uniform, the coded chapel meeting. Roger's shoulders sagged first. He confessed to forging Uncle Pace's endorsement of a new will clause, but insisted the shooting was unintended, a tragic misfire during a heated argument. Zoe's voice trembled next as she admitted writing the poison-laced letter meant to incapacitate her uncle, not kill him outright. The revolver, she said, was meant only as a threat. Hastings listened, notes precise, his resolve firm. By their own words, they had condemned themselves. As Zoe broke down in tears, Hastings reflected on how desperation had driven them to such lengths. Their plan had exploited every loophole: a locked door, an absent servant, vanished telegrams. Yet, in the end, human panic betrayed them. He sent a final dispatch to Poirot: conspirators in custody, awaiting your counsel on next steps. Early morning brought Hastings' first reply from Poirot. A bulleted list of overlooked details and a challenge to verify motive and means. The telegram read, check inheritance ledger. Analyze bullet trajectory. Confirm alibis against clock. HP. Armed with fresh insight, Hastings revisited the scene of the crime. He measured the ceiling joists again, mapping the precise arc needed for the fatal shot. He compared this to the angle Zoe described during her confession, finding a discrepancy that suggested a second concealed participant. Next, he inspected Uncle Pace's will in the lodge safe. The provisions favored Zoe heavily if no direct heirs remained, a clause Roger had neglected to mention. His last task was alibis. He cross-checked the household clock with villagers' testimonies, concluding that the chapel rendezvous, and thus the murder, had occurred 10 minutes earlier than the siblings claimed. Hastings wired Poirot. Thoughtful bullet arc suggests second shooter. Will clause motive confirmed. Timeframes invalidate alibis. As he sealed the dispatch, Hastings felt a thrill at Poirot's method. Cold precision exposing the warm chaos of human error. The case, he realized, was not solely about two conspirators, but about the unseen forces that guide even the most meticulous plots to unravel. That afternoon, Hastings uncovered a faded photograph tucked behind a desk blotter. Uncle Pace standing beside a young Zoe, both smiling. The inscription on the back, "For my dearest niece, 1912, hinted at a caring relationship before greed soured their bond. Hastings studied the image. Zoe's eyes then held warmth, not the steel he now knew. He tracked down the lodge's longtime groundskeeper, an elderly man named Whitaker, who recalled Zoe's childhood visits. Whitaker spoke of laughter echoing through the halls and a generous uncle who doted on his niece. But after her marriage, Whitaker added, voice low, she never returned. That absence, Hastings realized, fueled resentments that matured into murderous intent. In the fading light, Hastings walked the garden paths, imagining the younger pair among blooming roses. He knelt and picked a stray petal, soft, transient, like the innocence lost to time. The lodge, once a place of fond memories, had become a stage for betrayal. As he returned indoors, Hastings penned a final narrative summary for Poirot. The personal history, the will's evolution, and the emotional undercurrents that led Zoe to orchestrate her uncle's death. He sealed it with a sense of closure that only deepened his melancholy. Some mysteries, he thought, leave scars on the soul even when solved. Late one afternoon, Hastings discovered a bundle of unsent telegrams in the lodge's dispatch room. Dozens of messages that had never left their envelopes. He rifled through them until one stood out. Addressed to Uncle Pace, stamped with that same hastily scrawled London postmark. Its contents warning of a planned poisoning. He read the message by lamplight, heart sinking. If this telegram had arrived in time, Pace might have escaped his fate. He recalled how Mrs. Middleton, Zoe, in disguise, had arranged the clerical backlog, ensuring any damaging dispatches were sidelined. With trembling fingers, Hastings unfolded the paper. Trust no one. Delay of 24 hours is fatal. Anonymous friend. The note ended abruptly, as if the writer had been interrupted. Hastings realized the cup of brandy found near the body could easily have been laced with poison had Pace survived the shot. He hurried to show the telegram to Inspector Japp. The inspector's stern brow furrowed above a pair of steel-rimmed spectacles. They almost got away with it, Japp muttered. Together, they logged the document as critical evidence. Hastings felt a surge of frustration. Justice had been narrowly delayed, but not denied. That evening, he sent the telegram to Poirot, concluding, warning thwarted by conspiracy, confirmed motive and means. As the ticking of a grandfather clock echoed down the corridor, Hastings reflected on how a single bureaucratic delay had altered the course of fate. The case's final piece now lay in Poirot's hands. With evidence mounting, Hastings turned his attention to the Havering siblings' psychology. He sat Zoe in the lodge's sunlit study and gently questioned her upbringing and motivations. Her composure cracked as she spoke of years of patronage from her uncle, followed by bitter rejection when her marriage to Roger saw her cut off from family funds. Rage and abandonment, she confessed, had grown like poison in her heart. Meanwhile, Roger admitted to Hastings that he had sunk into financial ruin, gambling debts forcing him to borrow heavily. The prospect of inheriting Pace's estate had become his sole hope of salvation. Hastings observed Roger's restless hands and darting eyes, signs of desperation he'd seen before in broken men. Throughout long conversations, Hastings carefully recorded psychological details. Zoe's controlled voice faltering at certain memories, Roger's defensive posture when money was mentioned. He sent a confidential summary to Poirot noting, "Motive rooted in financial ruin and emotional betrayal. Partners in crime, bound by need and resentment." As dusk fell, Hastings walked the perimeter of the lodge, contemplating how anger and greed had warped family love into lethal conspiracy. He resolved that understanding their mindsets was as crucial as the physical evidence. Only by grasping their inner turmoil could justice truly be served. Armed with Zoe's confession of the coded chapel meeting, Hastings returned to the ruins under a half-moon sky. He retraced his earlier steps, inspecting hiding places where a second conspirator might have lurked. In a shadowed nook, he found footprints leading to a concealed alcove. And there, pressed between two stones, the remains of a second telegram.
"Midnight Chapel, bring revolver."
Realizing a hired gunman, likely Francis L., had been present, Hastings felt the stakes heighten. He set a silent alarm, a thin cord strung across the entrance attached to a bell. That night, he waited in stillness. Hours passed until the bell's faint toll punctured the quiet. He sprang forward to find only fluttering pages and a discarded glove. He retrieved the glove, a rough men's working glove stamped with a maker's insignia, and recognized it from a persecuted ex-footman he'd once met in London. The hired assassin had fled, but Hastings had pinpointed his identity and role. He documented the scene meticulously and wired Poirot, determined.
"Second participant confirmed. Hired killer identified by glove insignia."
By dawn, the Moor wind had scattered the remaining telegram fragments. Hastings felt the case drawing to its close, the architects of murder exposed, their accomplice unmasked. Only formal arrest and trial remained. With every piece assembled, Hastings gathered Zoe, Roger, and Inspector Japp in the grand parlor for the final reveal. He laid out the torn telegrams, the inheritance ledger, the button evidence, and the glove, each a shard of the conspiracy's mosaic. The siblings watched in taut silence as he recounted their plot: the fake housekeeper ruse, the poisoning attempt, the hired assassin, and the inheritance loophole. Hastings' voice rose with clarity. "You thought yourselves beyond suspicion, hiding behind locked doors and phantom servants, but the little gray cells of Poirot see all." He paused, letting the weight of Poirot's name settle the room. Zoe's lips trembled. Roger's shoulders slumped. Japp drew his revolver and placed them in formal arrest. As the siblings were let out in handcuffs, Hastings gathered the case materials to send to Poirot. The lodge's walls seemed to exhale, its long-held secrets finally laid bare. Though the corridors would remain silent, the story of Hunter's Lodge would echo through the annals of detective lore, a triumph of intellect over deceit. Returning to the lodge, Hastings focused on the forensic link between Zoe and the servant disguise. On the groundskeeper's report of uniform buttons found near the back door, he examined each brass button under a magnifying glass. One bore the crest of the Havering household, a precise match to Zoe's monogrammed attire and the servant's coat. He lined up the buttons on a velvet pad, comparing wear patterns and corrosion. While most matched common household buttons, the distinctive crest button, its edges worn by frequent handling, proved beyond doubt that Zoe had repeatedly donned the servant's guise. Hastings photographed the set and sent the images to Poirot and Scotland Yard. At the same time, he noticed a tiny splinter of wood lodged in the button's edge. likely from the chapel's weathered door. That confirmed its movement between both crime scenes. He cataloged the splinter as evidence, packaging it carefully. Hastings wrote to Poirot. Button, crest, and splinter confirm dual presence at lodge and chapel. Servant disguised definitively Zoe's. The detective's brilliance would rest on these tangible proofs, tying the final loose ends. News of the lodge murder spread like wildfire through the surrounding Derbyshire villages, carried by whispers in alehouses and gossip at the market stalls. By mid-morning, a small crowd had gathered outside Hunter's Lodge, peering through iron gates at the authorities coming and going. Children huddled at corners wide-eyed, while farmers paused in their work to exchange grave nods. Hastings stepped outside to observe the scene. The local blacksmith, Broadbent, spat on the ground and muttered about city folk and their city crimes. Mrs. Cartwright, the baker's wife, wrung her flour-dusted hands, lamenting the Eton-educated Havering air who'd turned so cold. Even Whitaker, the groundskeeper, confessed he felt the earth beneath his feet tremble with unease, as if the lodge itself mourns, he said. Yet some found grim fascination in the tragedy. A traveling reporter snapped photographs of constables hauling evidence boxes, his notebook filled with every lurid detail. Hastings recognized that the scandal would etch itself into local lore long after the parish bells tolled for the inquest. He felt a pang of regret. This quiet countryside, once untouched by violence, was now tainted by fear and suspicion. That evening, Hastings walked the perimeter hedges alone. The moor wind carried distant bleats of sheep and the faint creak of a gate swinging on its hinge. He pondered how a single crime could fracture an entire community's sense of security. In the hush of dusk, he resolved to document these reactions for Poirot, believing that the social impact was part of the case's broader tapestry. Months passed, and the Havering scandal faded into memory. Yet Hunter's Lodge never fully recovered. A new owner took possession, advertising the estate at a reduced price amid rumors of hauntings. Hastings returned once, curiosity drawing him back to the ivy-choked facade. The windows were boarded, the paint peeled. The stable block sagged under a thatched roof that no longer sheltered horses. He encountered a caretaker, a gaunt man named Fletcher, who offered a trembling tour. Fletcher's lantern threw flickering light on shuttered rooms and dust-laden furniture. He spoke of foot-spurring steps on empty stairs and soft sobbing heard at night, tales that Hastings dismissed as the product of idle minds. Still, the lodge's aura of tragedy clung to every corridor, as if the walls retained the memory of betrayal. In the overgrown garden, rose bushes grew wild, their petals wilted and strewn across cracked flagstones. Hastings knelt and scooped one in his palm, a fragment of beauty, tangled in neglect. He imagined Zoe and Roger's final days, an estate they resolved to claim, now slipping forever from human care. Before leaving, he placed a small brass button, one of the evidence pieces, atop the lintel above the front door, a silent marker of the truth uncovered. As he walked away, the lodge's hollow silhouette receded into the twilight, a cautionary monument to greed and guilt. In the quiet of his London flat, Hastings reflected on Hunter's Lodge alongside other famed locked-room mysteries. He pulled Christie's The Murder of Roger Ackroyd from his shelf and compared its ingenious twist to the Havering case. Both relied on hidden narrators, false identities, and the subtle art of misdirection. Yet Hunter's Lodge stood apart. The use of inheritance law, a hired assassin, and the servant's disguise elevated it to a broader commentary on class and desperation. Later, Hastings consulted a treatise on mystery fiction by G.K. Chesterton and noted how Chesterton praised the humane detective who probes human motives as deeply as physical evidence. Hastings realized that Poirot's compassion, his respect for both victim and culprit, echoed in every scene. He penned a short comparative essay, sending excerpts to both the Times and the Strand magazine, hoping to underline Christie's evolution of the genre. His writing underscored three key parallels: the deceptive narrator, the locked-room scaffold, and the fatal inheritance twist. He argued that Hunter's Lodge pushed each element to its limit, foreshadowing modern crime fiction's blend of legal intrigue and psychological depth. That evening, Hastings reread Poirot's letters of guidance, each a masterclass in deduction. He smiled, recalling how his friend would refuse praise, yet relish the knowledge that their work refined the art of detection for generations to come. Hastings received a fan letter from a young law student named Emily Thornton, who described how Poirot's methods inspired her career ambitions. Touched, Hastings penned a reply, encouraging Emily to value both logic and empathy in her future work. He enclosed photocopies of Poirot's telegrams, the originals safely archived, and urged her to study each step of the unfolding case. In drafting his letter, Hastings revisited key moments: the phantom servant ploy, the coded chapel rendezvous, and the inheritance ledger's hidden clause. He annotated each telegram with margin notes on emotional cues and logical leaps. As he worked, he felt the enduring power of Poirot's philosophy, that crime is solved not merely by evidence, but by understanding the human heart. He sent the letter and copies, imagining Emily's delight at holding tangible echoes of a case that once baffled even seasoned investigators. Hastings mused that Christie's detective, through them both, would continue to guide new generations of seekers in life's mysteries. Later, he placed the remaining telegrams in an oak archival box, inscribed with the Hunter's Lodge case files, to be preserved for posterity at the British Museum. The case would endure as a monument to the triumph of intellect and compassion over deceit. On a crisp autumn evening, Hastings strolled in Hyde Park, reflected on the public's enduring fascination with Hunter's Lodge. He passed joggers and dog walkers, their casual chatter a stark contrast to the lodge's once charged halls. Journalists still consulted him for interviews, and university scholars debated the case's moral nuances in lecture halls. Hastings paused by the Serpentine and watched swans glide across mirrored waters. He considered how locked room puzzles captivate us, promising order in chaos, resolution where none seems possible. Christie's genius lay in weaving legal intricacies, class dynamics, and psychological depth into a seamless narrative. Hunter's Lodge, he concluded, was her crowning early achievement. As the sun dipped below London's skyline, Hastings felt a quiet pride in his role. He raised his hat to the fading light, saluted the invisible little gray cells that had guided him, and whispered a silent thanks to Poirot, his friend, mentor, and the world's greatest detective. Years after the Havering scandal, Hunter's Lodge became legend in Derbyshire lore. Local guidebooks listed it among ghostly attractions. Day trippers ventured along the moorland road, cameras at the ready for spectral sightings. Hastings learned of this over tea with Inspector Japp during a rare London visit. Japp, as he recalled the coroner's report, no trial but plenty of late-night visitors. Despite the lodge's decay, stories endured. Villagers swore they heard footsteps in empty halls and saw candlelight flicker in boarded windows. A small band of paranormal investigators even set up camp one autumn, their equipment detecting unexplained electromagnetic readings near the chapel ruins. Hastings smiles at such superstitions, yet he understood the human need to keep the mystery alive. In the silence of his flat, Hastings composed a travelogue chapter about the lodge's afterlife. The guidebooks, the amateur sleuths, the pumpkin lanterns carried on Halloween night. He argued that the lodge's transformation, from scene of cunning murder to haunted attraction, mirrored society's shifting relationship with crime, from fear to fascination. As he mailed his manuscript to the Strand magazine, Hastings felt a gentle pride. The lodge's story had transcended its grim origins, becoming a tapestry of memory, myth, and the enduring power of narrative. Detective fiction thrived on Christie's innovations, and Hunter's Lodge case echoed in countless pastiches. Hastings received an invitation to a literary salon in Bath, where critics debated Christie's influence on modern mystery. He read passages from his journals, comparing Hunter's Lodge to later locked room classics, and fielded questions on narrative technique and character motive. A younger writer, inspired by Hastings's reflections, revealed her own novel featuring a disguised culprit and forged telegram. Excited, she credited Hunter's Lodge case as her muse. Hastings felt honored and slightly bemused that a story born of real tragedy had blossomed into art. In the salon's candlelit drawing room, earrings sparkling in the chandelier light, Hastings discussed the enduring trope of the little gray cells, emphasizing that empathy must undergird deduction. He quoted Poirot, thoughtful, "It is the psychology of crime that fascinates me most." The audience nodded, notebooks at the ready. That evening, back at his lodgings, Hastings penned a foreword for an upcoming anthology of Christie pastiches, underscoring the Lodge case's seminal role in detective lore. Hastings revisited Poirot's guiding principles in a lecture at the Royal Academy of Arts, illustrating how visual clues, like the button crest and torn telegram, mirror an artist's process of seeing the unseen. He displayed framed reproductions of evidence alongside Christie first editions, drawing parallels between composition in art and deduction in detective work. Students leaned forward as Hastings explained how Poirot's order and method resembled a painter's brushstrokes, deliberate, measured, each detail serving the whole. He highlighted the lodge's chapel ruins sketch he'd made, an ink drawing capturing the interplay of light and shadow where Zoe and Roger's fateful meeting occurred. After the lecture, an art history professor marveled at the crossover, surprised. Who knew detective work could inform our understanding of chiaroscuro? Hastings smiled, realizing that the case's legacy reached beyond crime fiction into the visual arts. That night, he strolled home, pondering how inference, whether in painting or detection, bridges observation and imagination. He resolved to include a visual essay on the case's settings in his next memoir. In the twilight of his life, Hastings penned the closing chapter of his memoir, Reflections on the Essence of Mystery and the Human Heart. He recalled Hunter's Lodge not merely as a puzzle to solve, but as a testament to love turned dark by desperation. Each telegram, each disguise, each hidden ledger entry had been propelled by profound emotion. He wrote of Poirot's compassion, how the detective viewed culprits not as monsters, but as flawed souls in need of reckoning. Hastings remembered the hush of the moonlit chapel and the weight of the gun's cold metal, a moment when choice became destiny. His final lines pondered the paradox that in seeking to expose darkness, one often finds a deeper light, the resilience of truth and the capacity for remorse. As he signed off, Hastings offered gratitude to readers who, like him, believe that mysteries speak to our shared humanity. As the final words of Hastings' memoir settled on the page, a hush fell over the study. He gazed at the framed photograph of Poirot, mustachioed and smiling, and whispered thanks to his friend's enduring brilliance. Though their days of chasing crime had ended, their partnership echoed in every corner of detective lore. He dimmed the lamp and listened to the night's gentle rhythms, the distant church bell tolling midnight, the soft patter of rain against the window, the sigh of ancient oak settling. In that quiet, Hastings imagined the souls of Hunter's Lodge, the victim, the conspirators, the betrayer, finding rest in the tapestry of story. With a final breath, he closed his eyes, offering a silent lullaby to those lost. May the echoes of your secrets be carried on gentle winds, and may truth's light guide every wandering heart.
In the hush of this ancient night, gentle scholar, imagine the lodge receding into distant memory, its walls softened by the slow drift of time. The air, once charged with secrets and shadowed footsteps, now floats serene and still. Candlelight flickers on walls that have known both joy and despair. Let the warmth of its glow soothe the tremor in your heart. Breathe deeply and feel the rhythm of those long-gone moors, where heather and bracken sway in whispered harmony. Let each breath draw you further from the tension of darkened corridors, guiding you toward fields of starlit peace. The hush of peat smoke mingles with the scent of old oak, weaving a tapestry of comfort around your thoughts. Validates your eyes may grow heavy as the wind-borne echoes of distant hounds fade into soft silence. There is no hurry here. There is only the gentle unfolding of rest. Recall the steadfast resolve of our faithful detective and his loyal companion, and know that even the gravest mysteries find their rest in the passage of time. Now let the final embers of evening drift away, carried on a breeze that sings of hope and tranquil dawns yet to come. Drifts beyond these ancient walls carry with you a quiet assurance. All shadows yield to morning light, and every unanswered question melts into new wonder. Sleep softly, dear listener, wrapped in the gentle embrace of history's lullaby, until the first golden rays of tomorrow rouse you with gentle promise.